Welcome to the Empowered Team Podcast. I am your host, Kari Schneider. Let's dive in today. This is episode 3 of our interactive series, the series of how we interact with other people and how we can be at our best. Today, we look at that thing called impatience. I bet you've interacted with other people in ways that was less than stellar. I know I have. Is it the abruptness? Is it snappiness? Is it being impatient in your head where you're just sighing, wishing this interaction was over? Or is it more pronounced? I know one time I had a client who was on an airplane and some behavior of another passenger didn't sit well with him. He completely told that person off. So it can be an obvious thing like that, or it can be an internal thing where you have very little tolerance for someone else around you, and suddenly it comes out in either quiet ways of sighing or huffing, or larger ways like interrupting or snapping at a person. These things happen to all of us. These are the things that are a symptom. They are not who you are. They are a symptom of something else. Today, I'm going to give you the top 3 reasons why impatience, snappiness, abruptness is showing up in your life and you don't want it to. It's the thing that you feel like, this is not an example of who I really am. So let's dive in. Here we go. First of all, when we think of high performance, and I am always drawing from my background in Olympic and national level sport for leaders in life. When you think about high performance, those athletes, you look at when you're training at the top level in the world and the type of training I've personally done for myself, there is no planet that it goes on and on and on without recovery. And yet we have leaders of multi-million-dollar companies, 8-figure companies, who are burning the candle at both ends. And I'm talking sleep. Sleep is the number one reason for impatience, snappiness, that abruptness that's showing up when you don't want it to. When we have less sleep, even one night of lower sleep than we need, it increases the amygdala by 60%. We're talking that primal part of your brain that regulates our anger, our emotional states. That gets ramped up by 60%. So we're far more reactive. We're more emotionally sensitive. And what does this do? It causes that impatience, causes that reactivity. So sleep is the number one reason for us becoming snappy or abrupt or impatient. And if I look around, I look at so many people who are not getting optimal sleep. Now, the researcher in this person, I have heard him interviewed over and over again. He has fantastic research. He's a neuroscientist. His name is Dr. Matthew Walker. He's out of UC Berkeley. And for him, they've done brain imagery. So we're talking an fMRI to compare emotionally well-rested brains to sleep-deprived brains. And there's some big differences. Both groups were showed progressively emotionally negative images and then measured the amygdala response. So guess what happens? The ones who are well-rested are not nearly as reactive, whereas one night of sleep deprivation triggered a 60% amplification in the amygdala. And this is this emotionally reactive state that we end up going into just as little as one night of less sleep. Now for you, I can imagine maybe you had a good night's sleep. Maybe you've had a good week's sleep, and maybe you're feeling fantastic. However, there's always that disruption, whether it's travel, whether it's something happened in the middle of the night with a family member, whether it's things that have kept you up mentally, emotionally. And then what happens the next day? It's compounded because of the lack of sleep, whatever was bothering us. When we have that amplification in the amygdala, it is paired with a reduction in connectivity between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So think of it, you've heard me talk about this before. Think of this as your primal brain, your limbic system, and then your smart, I call it the badass super genius. Your executive functioning brain, the decision making, the planning part of your brain, that's your prefrontal cortex. Now, between the two, it's almost like there's a break that happens. When you're sleep deprived, you don't have that ability to stop the reactive responses coming from your amygdala, coming from your primal brain. And then what happens is that we're deciding based on this reactive response instead of filtering through our badass super genius called our prefrontal cortex. And our prefrontal cortex is the one that's going to see our future for us, the one that's going to have our back, the one that's going to pre-think things out before taking an action, the one that's going to make sure that we're pumping the brakes before we do something impulsive. That's our prefrontal cortex. So this is the region that's called top-down control. This is the area that instead of being reactive, we're intentional, and it regulates our actions. This simply goes offline when we're underslept, when we haven't had enough of the recovery at night that we need. That's what happens. So what this means for leaders is that research shows that we need anywhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep per night. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, yep, I'm getting my 8 hours every night, I'd be surprised because most people who have busy lives and are leading are not getting that 7 to 9 hours a night. And we need to. We need it not just for recovery, we need it for performance, period. So what's happening in the real world is that we're not getting the 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And on top of that, there's this badge of honor that's going high-performing leaders acting as though it's this great thing that they're doing it all on 5 to 6 hours, thinking that they're more productive because they've gotten less sleep and put in an extra hour of work. And it's the complete opposite. We're simply not functioning at our best. So the number one thing here, in order for you not to be in your primal reactive zone and in order to not be snappy and impulsive, is going to be sleep. It's so critical. It's so important. And it's not only a health thing. This is high performance. I cannot think of a single athlete who was skimping on sleep. And we're talking athletes who were going from country to country, through time zones, going on jet-lagged scenarios over and over again for world championships, for international competitions. And there's not a single athlete that didn't have the utmost importance, the top prescription of sleep. So much so, what would happen is if we had a team traveling, let's say from Canada to Australia, and we knew that there was going to be an exhibition game as soon as we got there within 24 hours, and yet they've gone on a 24-hour trip. So what we would do in planning the physiology for the athletes is we would decide when we were going to stay up, when we were going to sleep ahead of time before that high performance. And then simultaneously, we would either get onto that other time zone and provide naps along the way so that we could recover and then be able to perform. This is what was necessary for optimal performance. And when I say performance, I'm not just talking the physical performance, because when you're competing at the top level of the world in a team sport or an individual sport, there's typically decision-making that has to happen, especially if it's a tactical team sport. There's fast decisions that have to be made, and if you're not rested, you can't make them. So the pro tip here's my practical pro tip on sleeping. You're going to say, well, I couldn't get to sleep. I have a hard time falling asleep. There wasn't enough time to sleep. I was traveling. There's always a way. If you're traveling, pro tip, if you're traveling and you're changing time zones, when you get there, either stay on your old time zone if you're only there for 3 days. That's a pro tip. Do not switch over to the other time zone. If you're in that time zone that's new for only 3 days, stay on your old time zone. Pro tip, make that a rule. Don't even question ever when you're getting there, oh, I'm going to switch over. No, you're not. You're going to stay on your regular time zone, even though you're in another time zone for 3 days. If it's more than 3 days, then you want to consider it. But if it's not even a question. That is a pro tip. I've made the decision for you. You don't have to make it. Congratulations. There you go. Second pro tip for sleep. When you are sleep deprived, you know that it's going to be a red-eye flight, and then you're going into a meeting, and then you've got to travel again, or you've got to go do a regular work bout. In that case, plan a nap. I don't care who you are or how busy you are or how important your role is. Guess what? You can carve out 30 minutes in your day to remove yourself in your office and lie on your floor, to get into your vehicle and put the seat back, but designate somewhere between 10 to 30 minutes of quiet time. Now, you might be saying to me, I can't fall asleep in that time, or you might say to me, if I fall asleep, I won't wake up. Either way, plan it out. If you can't fall asleep, just give yourself that rest time between 10 and 30 minutes, period. And if you're afraid you're going to fall asleep and not wake up, have somebody come and make sure you're awake. And I can feel in this moment, I can feel the embarrassment or the I can't do that kind of thinking. Yes, you can. You know why? Because those very people that you're worried about being embarrassed toward, or embarrassed from or at, or whatever the word is, those very people are the people who you need to perform your best for. This isn't a I'm so strong thing. You need to perform your best for those people. And those people are learning from you. You might say one thing and be doing another and then expecting them to do the thing you tell them to, but they're not going to. If you keep burning the candle at both ends, that's the message you're sending as a leader to the people that you're leading, period. So, pro tip, don't change time zones if you're only traveling for 3 days to another time zone. And if you are burning the candle at both ends, you know you are going to be sleep deprived for at least one or more nights, plan a nap. At least 30 minutes carved out of simply quiet time, nothing else. If you need to distract your brain with some music, with a guided meditation, do it. Whatever you need to do, give yourself whatever you can to get a little extra sleep. Okay, last pro tip I'm going to give you on the sleep is your nighttime ritual. When you do your nighttime ritual, you are starting to slowly ramp down your brain so that it can have all the little cues that are preset so that your brain knows, oh, guess what? It's about to be time to sleep. And it's a beautiful thing. For me, my nighttime ritual, I make sure the TV or the computer or whatever screen is off at least an hour before I'm going to sleep. Ideally 2 hours before I'm going to sleep. And once I start my nighttime routine, it's an hour before I intend to be lights out. That means I'm going to be setting clothes out for workout, clothes out for dressing, brushing teeth, washing face, reading, journaling, all of those things, meditating, all those things are happening in the hour before the light gets switched off. And by the time I switch the light off, I'm likely to fall asleep between 5 and 15 minutes, which is a beautiful time span for getting a great sleep. It's called sleep latency. And if I can have that sleep latency, that time window between 5 and 15 minutes, that's ideal for going into your sleep zones. So those are your pro tips. Don't change your time zone if you're 3 days into a different one. Get a nap if you know you've been sleep deprived, and do a nighttime ritual routine to help your brain unwind and have you more likely to get into sleep when those lights go out. Great stuff. Really, really great stuff. Okay, so 7 to 9 hours. See what you can do to start getting in that zone. Number 2. Why are you going to snap at other people? You ever been hangry? Ooh. Low blood sugar, hangry? Now, this one is under a lot of different conflicting research, and here's why. Because depending on how you're physiologically trained, you can be fat adapted. And you may not be fat adapted. If you're not fat adapted, you are more susceptible to low blood sugar crashes or sugar crashes. If that's the case, then you have to make sure your blood sugar is stable all day because you are very carb dependent. Now, this is going to be dependent on how you eat and how you train. If you are someone like me who's more fat adapted, I can go for fairly long bouts without sugar or carbohydrates because my body's going to tap into fat stores. And that's because I've trained it in certain ways to learn how to tap into fat stores. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. I'm not going to dive into that as the topic today, but I'll give you a couple tips on it. However, in this particular research that was done, it's this combination. Yes, blood sugar can be a thing, but really what comes in is this self-regulation, this ability to have willpower. And here's what the research says. This is by Dr. Roy Baumeister, and this is a social psychologist out of Florida State University. And he has a famous experiment, and this is the experiment. These are the ones that crack me up. I think they're so good. The participants, all the control group, the study group, I should say, not control group. The study group was brought into a lab, and they had fresh baked cookies in front of them and a bowl of radishes. Now, I don't care how much you love radishes. If you got the two compared there, I don't know which one you're going to choose, but I'd always go for the fresh baked cookies. That's just me. So what they did is one group was told that they could eat the cookies. The other group had to resist the cookies and eat only radishes. And they've got them both in front of them. An act requiring self-control. Both groups were then given an unsolvable puzzle. Like they had to try as long as they could at this puzzle. Keep going and going at this puzzle. And what happened? The cookie resistors, the one who had to eat the radishes and not have any cookies, the cookie resistors gave up on the puzzle significantly faster. Not because they're necessarily weaker, there's nothing wrong with them, but they'd already spent their self-regulation resource. I start to refer to this for me as tokens. I only have so many energy tokens. I only have so many self-regulation tokens. I only have so many attention tokens. Why do I say this to myself? To remind myself what I know about the research. And this one is particularly in self-regulation. So what happens is that the exertion of self-control appears to depend on a limited resource. We don't have unlimited self-control. Just like a muscle will get tired if you keep using it and using it and using it, eventually you just can't. Even if the weight was light, eventually you're still going to fatigue. It causes this short-term impairment in when you're trying to use self-control, even on completely unrelated tasks. And that's why it was so interesting about the cookies, the radishes, and then the unsolvable puzzle. The unsolvable puzzle had nothing to do with radishes and cookies, had nothing to do with food. And yet the fact that somebody was resisting the cookies then had them have a hard time persisting through the puzzle, something that was challenging their brain, making them try, making them keep going. And they just couldn't because they'd already tried so hard previously. So really, really interesting things. So this is where when you look at 4 p.m., 2 p.m., 4 p.m., 6 p.m., and anybody who's been in a high demand work role or in any leadership role, they're depleted. The number of decisions, likely in the thousands by 4 p.m., thousands of decisions that have already been made. Now you're in this depletion mode. So then you're asked to go to another meeting at the end of the day, or you go home and you're asked to make decisions about the family, and you just feel snappy. You feel like you can't. I know that when I was running a brick and mortar business that had very specific hours, and I was running through those hours because I had to get home to get the youngest child off the bus, walk the dog while doing it, get the dinner on before the older ones got home, before we were about to head out the door to go to the next sports things. And guess what would happen in that zone? That zone inevitably somebody would come in with a question about homework, signing some field trip authority, whether someone could have a sleepover or not, and I'm being asked to make more decisions. And then I'd feel snappy or impatient and be wondering and beating myself up for why I just wanted to get home and be with the kids. I love my role. I love my work. However, I also love my family. And why was I feeling like a depleted version of myself by the time I got home? Well, the answer's simple. You can only keep pushing through so much. You can only keep going so long while regulating yourself when you feel like you can't. So when you've held your tongue, when you've not said the thing, when you've acted the way you needed to, when you've been your top professional self all day long, and by the end of the day, you're driving home and you want to flip off a stranger because they cut you off in traffic, that's what's going on right there. And then you get home, or maybe you snap at your spouse, or you have very little attention for your kids. That's what's going on. You have depleted the amount you've been able to regulate your behavior all day long, and then you're asked to do more and you simply don't have it. So this nuance here now, could low blood sugar have contributed? Absolutely. Could that low blood sugar, hangry kind of scenario? Yes. However, low blood sugar isn't the fix. Willpower isn't the fix. It's design. It's designing your day, scheduling your toughest decisions, your hardest conversations at times when you know you have a lot of willpower, a lot of self-regulation, a lot of attention, a lot of energy. Your tokens, in my words, are high. You've got lots of tokens to draw from. Now, as you go through the day and as you get to the end of the day, this is why it's by design. You need to do or give yourself what you need to replete yourself enough to give yourself another token. So here's where the pro tip comes in. For me, I will have to, if I have had a demanding day like that, I will have to be alone. I will have to specifically either have the right foods. I cannot have too much sugar throughout the day. If I have too much sugar, I will crash from that. I cannot be dehydrated. That will cause problems for me. I cannot go all the way through meeting after meeting back to back without a quiet break alone. So these are things I know about myself, which are true for other people too. Some people are repleted around other people. I am not. I love being with people. I love interacting. Some people will think I'm an extrovert. I can be outgoing, but naturally I'm not an extrovert. I'm an introvert. I recharge by myself. I recharge alone. And then I love to be with people. I love to be outgoing. But if I'm outgoing for too long, I will deplete very quickly and need some sort of repletion so that I'm not snappy and losing my own attention, my own willpower. Your self-regulation is a resource. And anyone who is an elite performer, a high achiever, knows how to regulate that for themselves. They know when they're going to go down, they know what they're likely to need, and they know how to give it to themselves, and they know how to restrict what is going to be too much. That's what an elite performer does. An example in high-performance sport is not a single high-performance athlete who is going to go out and do an extra practice when they've already practiced twice that day and they've got a game the next day. It doesn't make any sense. No coach would allow that. They need to recover from the other two practices or the other one practice before they go in to compete. So consider that when you are feeling that snappiness, that impatience, that abruptness, those are just symptoms. All right, let's go on to the third root cause for the symptom of our snappiness. Now, this one is systemic. This one may have happened to you in a season of life, may be happening to you right now. And what it is chronic stress. We can't keep putting the gas pedal down to the floor. We can't keep flooring it, pushing through in fifth gear all the time. We just can't. And what I mean by that is I'm not just talking about the sleep and the day-to-day recovery of our attention or our energy. I'm talking about the big spans of time. You can't go through every season being an intense push of a season. There has to be a pullback in your seasons. If you don't have that, then you end up burning out. I remember working with national teams in volleyball and national teams in hockey and rugby and soccer and all these pro sports or these national level sports. There would be these 2 seasons. The national season was typically in a summer, let's say for volleyball, and then in the other times, the fall and the winter, that would be the pro season. And for the best players in the world, they would be going into playoffs and then maybe a championship in their pro season, which would push their time into the national season, which would mean that if they were a really good player, they pushed all the way through their pro season, made it to playoffs, maybe even won a championship. But because they went to playoffs and a championship, their season didn't end early. And then they went on to a national season and they'd be so exhausted. And then the national team would have to accommodate that because if they pushed them into more practice and more of a push, they weren't ready for it. They needed physical recovery. Now, sometimes that was cut really short. It might have been 2 to 4 weeks instead of 2 to 3 months. I've been lucky enough to work with Stanley Cup winners. I've been lucky enough to work with champions of various sorts. And the depletion that happens in those athletes, I'm talking weight loss, exhaustion, complete fatigue. It's not a good thing. Now, these are athletes, and there's a plan around how to manage this and how to build this athlete back up. Where's the plan for you? Where's the plan for you as a leader when you've gone through a season of building a company, and then simultaneously in that season, you've had children, and simultaneously in that season, some big economic crashes happened or challenges in the workplace, and you've had to deal with it all. Or maybe even a divorce or a family member being ill. All of these things are too much to keep going and going and going, and yet many people don't know what to do or how to change it. What this does to our nervous system, it ends up causing problems. It might show up initially as some physical things, maybe an injury that you have no mechanism for, or maybe it's kidney stones, or an abscess, or type 2 diabetes. You might notice some things that your body simply cannot regulate, cannot repair itself because it's under chronic stress. What this looks like when it comes to chronic stress, if you have stress going on and on, there are predictable stages of stress, one of which is alarm, then resistance, and then exhaustion. Resistance stage, there's the alarm and then the resistance and the exhaustion. The resistance stage is where most high-performing leaders are living too often. That resistance stage of just, panic, but then, okay, brace yourself, brace yourself, brace yourself. They've adapted to elevated stress where they can still function, but there's a cost. And the cost just keeps taking and taking and taking from your brain and your body and your performance. So that's the cost. The symptoms of this resistant stage in chronic stress include poor concentration, irritability. This is exactly what we're talking about. Impatience, snappiness, abruptness. That's the irritability, and frustration. If the stressful event persists, the body enters exhaustion stage. And this is characterized by burnout, fatigue, depression, anxiety, and a reduced stress tolerance. So not only can you not handle the stress that you used to be able to handle, you've got all these other symptoms on top of it. This is what the research shows. Reduced stress tolerance is a key phase. It's not that things are going wrong. It's that your threshold for what is going wrong is less high, is less tolerant. You can't do it. And it drops to almost nothing. And what this looks like is your nervous system running hot all the time. It's that you're in a sympathetic nervous system zone and your parasympathetic nervous system doesn't get to come back online and rest and recover and get cozy and calm and sleepy. Have you felt that in a while? Cozy, calm, sleepy. Probably not when you're in that high chronic stress state, because your sympathetic is running all the time. And I've been in that state. I've gone through some very stressful experiences in my life, and they've endured long because what has happened is that when that one stressful experience was done, let's say it was a move or the death of a family member or a family member with an illness, then something else happened unexpectedly at the same time. So maybe for you, like me, there was circumstance after circumstance after circumstance that then led to burnout or serious illness because of the chronic stress. And sometimes, in order to survive, you didn't know what else you could possibly do other than keep going because there was no one or no way to get the recovery that you might have needed. And that's the hard part, because you perceive at the time that there is nothing else that you can do. So what happens when you're in this burnt out or chronic stress state, even a neutral event ends up being perceived as a threat to your brain and to your body. And your system, your whole nervous system can't handle that. So chronic stress can be a very dangerous thing. This is where any neutral thing, like a slow driver, neutral thing like a question asked at the wrong time. Your child innocently asks you something and you snap at them. Someone chewing too loudly, that's their business. It's not your business. But something like that could be perceived as a threat or a problem. Well, it's not. But because of the state of your whole nervous system and the chronic stress, it perceives it as being that. There is no buffer. Stress becomes corrosive. It's too long. It's too much. So over time, what happens is that the baseline itself shifts upward. And burnout is this impatience as a symptom constantly. Workers experienced chronic burnout and showed higher levels of post-work irritability, more sleep disturbances, and complaints of waking up exhausted. That was one of the first signs for me, is I would sleep and I would feel exhausted. And it's this state that's associated with what's called heightened somatic arousal. And what that means is your body, your nervous system and your body is constantly at a level higher. You're not quite getting down into that complete relaxed or recovered state. And in the sporting world, we did what's called periodization. We never, ever would have allowed an athlete to be going on constant build cycles. We would do cycles of build for 2 to 3 weeks, and then there'd be a recovery week usually. Usually it's in week cycles. We'd use the microcycles of weeks to go and build into a mesocycle. This is called periodization. And what's happening in most leaders' lives, day-to-day lives, they might be building sprints into their business, 2-week sprints, but not giving the recovery or the planning stages. And they're definitely not giving that to themselves. And when that's happening, the impatience, the irritability, the abruptness, all of that is going to go up, up, and up. So let's look at this. The pro tip on this one is giving yourself some sort of extended break. And what I mean by that is that you have a season where there's certain things you simply don't do. There might be a season where the kids have 3 to 4 weeks of camps and you don't have kids. You're not parenting for a span of time. Or if you have certain projects, they don't happen at certain times of year. or you go on a span of time where you don't travel, just to give your body that break of travel. There's a number of things that we can do, and we act as though we're helpless, but we're not. We can make those decisions so that we can have the life that we want that is included with full recovery. Because when you get recovery, you feel amazing. And it doesn't matter what happens with someone else or the circumstances and other things. It's not going to turn you into this snappy ogre. It's going to have you be able to consider, reflect, and consciously make decisions. The snappiness, the impatience, it's not who you are. It's simply a symptom of what's been going on in your life and a symptom of not designing your life accordingly to give yourself what you need. The sleep, the ability to regulate throughout your day, and over time, the recovery bouts that your body and your brain need. It's your design. It's your life. And no matter what you think that you can't, I thought that for so long, I can't. They need me here. They need me there. That's simply a thought pattern that feeds into fear, feeds into, I'm afraid that if they don't need me, then I'm not enough. I'm not significant. The truth is, you can walk away from most things and they're still going to be fine. The truth is, you can walk away from most things for just enough of a chunk of time for you to get your breath, for you to get what you need, and then go back to it. It's going to be okay. All right. So here's a challenge for this week. Here's my challenge to you. The challenge is this week, the next time you feel yourself getting impatient, snappy, abrupt, irritable, even just irritable, then before you respond, ask one question. Am I tired? Am I depleted? Am I running on empty? Because the answer will tell you a whole lot more than the situation that's causing that little symptom. I challenge you to take care of you. I challenge you, anytime you feel snappy, to use that as your cue to remove yourself for just a moment, take a breath, and take a look. Did I just not get any sleep? Have I been going too hard, too long, today? Or is this an ongoing thing of chronic stress and I need to make some serious changes? Because that's all it's going to come down to. You've got this. I've got you. Let's go. If this helped you and you know someone who could use this message, then share it. Share our podcast, the Empowered Team Podcast. Have a great day. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week.